The invitation was handwritten. That was the first mistake. His wife never wrote anything herself. Everything in their world was typed, encrypted, erased, clean, untouchable. But this? Ink. Intentional. Personal. Sebastian Junho stared at the card longer than he should have, his jaw tightening as he read the final line again. Dinner tonight. I've invited someone you've been meaning to introduce me to. No name, no accusation, just precision. And somehow, that was worse. Because in his world, secrets didn't get exposed. They got buried. So why did it feel like he was the one about to be laid out on the table? Sebastian Junho didn't marry Gwen Jonathan for power. He married her because she was the only person who never tried to understand him. She never asked questions, never pushed, never chased his attention. She accepted him exactly as he presented himself. And somehow, that made her the most dangerous person in his life. The invitation lay on the black marble of his desk like a single drop of blood on fresh snow. Sebastian Junho picked it up again, turned it over once, twice, as though the reverse side might offer mercy. It did not. The cream stock was heavy, expensive, the kind of paper that cost more per sheet than most men made in a week. And the ink, black, permanent, unmistakably fountain pen, was still faintly tacky under his thumb. She had written it recently, today perhaps, while he was still asleep beside her this morning, breathing evenly, believing the night had ended cleanly. He laughed once. The sound came out short and sharp, more bark than amusement, and died against the glass walls of his office. Then he reached for his phone. The call connected before the second ring. Boss? Min Jae, I need handwriting analysis, fast. Photograph incoming. He snapped a clear shot of the card, front and back, sent it, then waited. The silence on the line was professional, patient. Min Jae never wasted breath. 37 seconds later, it's her. Sebastian's thumb froze on the edge of the card. Confirm. Stroke pressure, letter slant, the way the T crosses high and left. Same as the birthday note she wrote you 2 years ago. The one you burned. No forgery markers, no hesitation in the flow. She wrote it herself. A long breath moved through Sebastian's lungs, slow and deliberate, the way he exhaled before pulling a trigger. Except, no trigger existed here. She never writes, he said, more to himself. She did this time. Another silence. Min Jae waited. Anything else? The ink is Mont Blanc Permanent Black. She keeps a bottle in the library drawer, the one next to the first edition Sun Tzu you gave her on your anniversary. Sebastian closed his eyes for half a second. When he opened them, the city skyline beyond the window looked exactly the same, cold steel and colder glass. But the reflection of his own face in the glass had changed. The jaw was still sharp, the eyes still dark, but something behind them had shifted. Not fear, not yet. Just the first hairline fracture in a surface he had always believed unbreakable. He ended the call without another word. The card went back into his pocket, close to his chest like a second heartbeat. He stood, walked to the window, pressed one palm flat against the glass. Seoul glittered below him, indifferent, sprawling, full of people who still thought he owned every shadow in the city. For the first time in years, maybe ever, he felt the smallest flicker of something genuine and unfamiliar curl beneath his ribs. Unease. Not panic. Not anger. Just the quiet, surgical realization that the one person he had never needed to watch had been watching him the entire time. And she had chosen tonight to stop pretending otherwise. Sebastian slid the phone from his inner pocket before the elevator doors closed behind him. The screen lit his face in cold blue as he typed one word into the encrypted thread he shared with Naira. Tonight. Decline. He hit send and watched the single gray tick turn blue almost instantly. Delivered. Read. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then, already said yes. She was very persuasive. A second message followed before he could respond. Black dress, red lipstick, your favorite. See you at 8? No question mark, just the faint curl of confidence he had once found intoxicating. Now, it felt like a blade pressed lightly against his throat. He stared at the words until they blurred. Naira never used emojis, never begged for clarification. She answered in full sentences or not at all. Precise, controlled. Like him. Except she had no idea the invitation hadn't come from curiosity. He typed quickly. Do not come. Emergency. I'll explain later. The dots danced longer this time. You sound tense. Bad day at the office? He could picture her, lounging on the cream sofa in her Gangnam apartment, one leg crossed over the other, phone balanced on her knee, lips curved in that half-smile that said she already knew she would win whatever game they were playing. Another message. Your wife called me herself. Said it was overdue. Said you'd been meaning to make introductions. I thought it was sweet. Sweet. The word landed like a slap wrapped in silk. Sebastian's thumb hovered. He deleted 3 different replies before settling on, She has my number. Why call you? Naira's response came faster. She has mine too. Has for months, apparently. We talked about art, Korean ceramics. She has excellent taste. He felt the air leave his lungs in a slow, controlled hiss. Gwen didn't collect ceramics. She collected leverage. Naira sent one more line. Don't worry, I'll behave. Mostly. Then the thread went quiet. Sebastian leaned his head back against the mirrored wall of the elevator. The numbers climbed steadily toward the penthouse. Each floor ticked past like a countdown he hadn't authorized. Naira thought this was foreplay, a little drama, a chance to see the wife up close, maybe measure herself against her, maybe walk away with another piece of him. She had no idea the table was already set, and that Gwen had known her private number, her real one, not the burner she used for everyone else, long before tonight. He slipped the phone back into his pocket as the doors opened onto the marble foyer. The apartment smelled faintly of jasmine and gun oil, Gwen's perfume, and the faint trace of whatever weapon his security detail had cleaned that afternoon. He paused in the doorway, listening. Somewhere deeper inside, soft footsteps moved across hardwood, measured, unhurried. Gwen was home, and she was already preparing the board. Sebastian straightened his cuffs, smoothed the invisible crease in his composure, and stepped inside. The game had begun without him. He just hadn't realized he was playing catch-up. The penthouse was quiet in the way only money and menace could make quiet. Thick carpets swallowing footsteps, floor-to-ceiling glass muting the city's roar to a distant hum. Sebastian found Gwen in the living room, standing at the bar cart like she had been waiting for the exact second he crossed the threshold. She didn't turn at first, just selected the bottle of Yamazaki 18 she knew he preferred when the day had teeth, poured 2 fingers into a heavy tumbler, and set it on the marble without a sound. Only then did she look at him. Her smile was small, soft, the one she wore when diplomats left the room still believing they had won something. "Long day?" she asked, voice low and velvet. Sebastian didn't answer right away. He crossed the room in measured strides, stopped just outside the circle of lamplight that haloed her. Up close, she smelled of jasmine and the faintest trace of ink, still on her fingers perhaps, from the card that now burned against his chest. "You wrote it yourself," he said, not a question. Gwen lifted her own glass, neat, no ice, and took a slow sip. "I did." "Why?" She tilted her head, studying him the way one studies a painting whose value has just been questioned. Then she stepped closer, close enough that he could see the faint shimmer of gold at her throat, the necklace he had given her the night they signed the marriage papers, a reminder, always, of the contract. She reached up, brushed her lips against his cheek, light, almost tender, and murmured against his skin, "I thought it was time we all met properly." The words landed soft, too soft, no heat, no tremor, just certainty. Sebastian searched her face for the things he expected: rage, hurt, the flicker of betrayal that would give him leverage, an opening to apologize or deflect or threaten. He found none of it. Only quiet victory. Eyes calm, dark, unreadable, mouth curved in the smallest arc of satisfaction. The look of someone who had already counted the pieces on the board and knew the game was over before the first move was announced. His pulse kicked once, hard, then steadied. He refused to let it show. "You invited her here," he said, voice flat. "To our home." "Our table," Gwen corrected gently. "She'll sit across from me. You'll sit between us. It will be civilized." Civilized. The word tasted like ash. Gwen set her glass down, fingertips lingering on the rim. "You've always said control is everything, Sebastian. That secrets only have power when they stay secret." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "So let's stop pretending they are." He felt the air shift between them, the way it does before a storm breaks over the Han River. Still, heavy, inevitable. She turned away then, walked toward the dining room to check the settings one last time. Her heels clicked once, twice, then faded. Sebastian remained where he was, whiskey untouched, staring at the place where she had stood. For the first time, the penthouse didn't feel like his fortress. It felt like the elegant cage she had always known it to be. And he was still inside it. The memory came unbidden, sharper now, edged with the heat that had followed. 3 months ago, the velvet room at the top of the Lotte World Tower, private booths carved from obsidian and velvet, air thick with oud and expensive smoke. Sebastian had arrived late, security fanning out behind him like shadows with earpieces. The room hushed the moment his name rippled through the waitstaff. Heads turned, drinks paused mid-sip. Women adjusted necklines, men straightened spines. Standard choreography. Except one. She sat alone at the far end of the curved bar, back straight, black dress clinging like liquid night. No phone, no performative boredom, just quiet attention to the martini glass in front of her, turning the stem once, twice, watching the olive drift. When the bartender leaned in to murmur who had just entered, she didn't glance over, didn't stiffen, didn't smile the practiced half-smile the others offered like currency. She simply continued, turning the stem. Sebastian felt it, like a hook behind his ribs, the absence of reaction. In his world, indifference was rarer than fear. He moved through the room, slow, deliberate, letting the silence part around him. He stopped 2 stools away, ordered the same martini without looking at her, and waited. Nothing. No sidelong glance, no flutter, no sudden interest in her phone when his detail shifted closer. She lifted the glass to her lips, sipped, set it down. The faintest curve touched the corner of her mouth, not at him, but at some private thought. He spoke first, low, testing. Most people look when I walk in. Naira turned her head slowly, like a cat deciding whether the sound was worth investigating. Pale green eyes, almost translucent under the low lights. They met his without flinching. "Most people aren't worth looking at," she said. The words landed clean, no venom, no flirtation, just fact. He laughed, genuine, surprised, and something shifted. Recognition. 2 people who understood the value of not reacting. They spoke for 2 hours, no small talk. She told him about a gallery in Berlin she had no intention of attending. He told her about a deal in Macau he had already won. When the room emptied and the staff began to hover, she stood, left exact change on the bar, not a tip, and walked out without asking if he was coming. He followed. The elevator ride down was silent until the doors closed. Then she turned, pressed him against the mirrored wall, and kissed him like she had been waiting for permission she never needed. His hands found her waist. Hers found the ink hidden under his collar. The spike of adrenaline from the night, the ignored stares, the quiet challenge, ignited. They barely made it to her apartment. Clothes hit the floor in the hallway. She pushed him onto the bed, straddled him, moved with the same controlled precision she'd shown at the bar. No begging, no performance. Just raw, mutual hunger. He gripped her hips hard enough to leave marks. She dragged nails down his chest, drawing thin red lines across the tattoos that never saw daylight. They fucked like people trying to prove something, fast, brutal, breathless, until the city lights blurred outside the window and neither could remember who had started it. Afterward, she lay beside him, breathing steady, tracing idle patterns on his skin. Neither spoke of Gwen. Neither needed to. It was clean, controlled, equal. Until now. Sebastian blinked, and the memory dissolved. He was back in the penthouse hallway, palm flat against the cool wall, breath shallow. The woman who had ignored him that first night, the one who had taken him apart in her bed without ever asking for more, had just accepted an invitation from the wife he had never expected her to meet. And the taste in his mouth wasn't triumph anymore. It was the metallic tang of a trap he had walked into himself. Because he had believed the one woman who didn't react to him would never react to anyone else. He had been wrong, and Gwen had known it before he did. Sebastian moved through the penthouse like a man inventorying a battlefield he no longer controlled. 3 hours until 8. He started in the kitchen. The catering team, 4 discreet professionals hired through a shell company, were already unpacking crates of chilled oysters, wagyu, and the exact vintage of Sancerre Gwen had requested. He caught the lead chef by the elbow as she arranged porcelain. "Extra 10 million won," he said quietly. "You see nothing tonight. You hear nothing. You remember nothing." The woman didn't blink. "Already in the contract, sir. Discretion is standard." "Make it personal," he pressed, sliding a black card across the counter. "Burner phone. If anything feels off, text this number. 1 word. Problem." She pocketed it without looking. "Understood." Next, the dining room. He knelt beside the long ebony table, slipped a micro-recorder beneath the lip of his chair, small enough to pass as a screw head. Another under Gwen's place setting. A third near Naira's. The devices synced to his phone. He tested the feed. Crystal clear static. Then the faint clink of silverware from the staff next door. Good. He rehearsed the lies in his head as he moved to the study. If Gwen asked how long, "A few weeks. Impulse. Over now." If Naira pushed, "She knows. It's handled. Stay calm." If either demanded names, dates, proof, deflection. "This isn't the time. Let's eat." Each version sounded thinner than the last. He caught his reflection in the glass bookcase, jaw tight, eyes too bright, and looked away. In the master bath, he stripped to the waist to change shirts. The tattoos stared back at him, black ink curling from collarbone to elbow, hidden always beneath crisp cotton and tailored wool. Tonight, they felt like brands, exposed, as though Gwen had already seen every line, every secret etched into his skin, and decided which ones to cut open first. He buttoned a fresh black shirt, rolled the sleeves once, then twice, habit, armor, then paused. The ink peaked at the cuffs now. Deliberate? Unconscious? He didn't know anymore. Back in the hallway, he checked his phone. No new messages from Naira. No cancellation. Just the clock ticking down. 2 hours, 58 minutes. He crossed to the floor-to-ceiling window, pressed his forehead to the cool glass. Souls sprawled beneath him, indifferent lights blinking like distant eyes. He had built this view, this life, on the certainty that no one could reach him here. Yet Gwen had reached, and Naira was coming. Every contingency he laid felt 1 second too slow, like moving through water while the current pulled the other way. The listening devices, the bribes, the rehearsed lines, they were all pieces of a defense that assumed he still held the high ground. He no longer did. The tattoos itched under the fresh shirt. Not pain, awareness, as though the ink itself remembered hands that weren't Gwen's, nights that weren't sanctioned, and now whispered the truth to the one woman who had never needed to ask. Sebastian straightened. 2 hours, 55 minutes. He walked toward the dining room to check the place settings one last time. The table was set for 3, and for the first time, he wasn't sure which seat was the trap. The doorbell chimed at exactly 7:58 p.m., a single crystalline note that cut through the penthouse like a scalpel drawn across silk. Sebastian stood in the foyer, shoulders squared, cuffs rolled precisely once. The black shirt fit like armor, but the ink beneath it felt restless, as though the tattoos remembered hands that weren't Gwen's and were impatient to be reminded. He exhaled once, slow and controlled, then opened the door. Naira Vale stood framed in the hallway light like a photograph someone had forgotten to develop fully, sharp edges, soft shadows. The black dress was simple at first glance, sleeveless, high neck, floor-length column of matte silk that clung without effort. But the fabric caught the foyer sconces and shifted, revealing exactly how it traced the curve of her hip, the dip of her waist, the faint swell where his palms had pressed hard enough 2 nights ago to leave faint purple blooms he'd kissed before she left his bed. The neckline was modest. The back, when she turned slightly to hand her coat to the waiting attendant, plunged low enough to show the clean line of her spine and the small constellation of freckles he had once traced with his tongue. Her perfume hit him next, something cool and expensive, white flowers edged with smoke. It mingled instantly with the jasmine that still lingered in the air from Gwen's earlier pass through the room. 2 scents, 2 women, 1 foyer. The combination made his throat tighten. Naira's pale green eyes met his without hesitation. No surprise, no nerves. Just that same quiet amusement she'd worn the first night at the Velvet Room, as though she'd already decided the evening would end on her terms. "You look tense," she said, voice low, almost intimate. "Bad traffic?" He didn't smile. "You came." "I was invited." She stepped inside, heels clicking once against the marble, deliberate, unhurried. The sound echoed in the high ceiling like the first note of a song he didn't want to hear the end of. From the living room archway, Gwen appeared. She had changed into smooth silver satin, soft, luminous fabric that caught the light with every step, draping perfectly over her frame. The dress was long-sleeved, floor-sweeping, conservative until it moved and the slit at the thigh flashed a glimpse of leg. Her hair was swept into a low chignon. A single diamond stud caught the light at her ear. She looked like she had stepped out of a diplomatic reception and straight into command. "Naira," Gwen said, the name rolling off her tongue with practiced warmth. She crossed the foyer in 3 graceful strides, extended a hand. "Thank you for coming." Naira took it without pause. Their fingers lingered 1 beat longer than courtesy required. Gwen's dark skin against Naira's pale, a study in contrast that made Sebastian's pulse kick against his collar. Gwen's thumb brushed the inside of Naira's wrist, light as breath, then released. "I've heard so much," Gwen continued, smile small and perfect. "Though not from my husband, of course." Naira's lips curved. "He's not the talkative type." "No," Gwen agreed softly. "But he's very thorough." The word hung between them. Sebastian felt it land in his chest like a stone dropped into still water. Ripples spread, heat at the base of his spine, a sudden awareness of how tight the shirt felt across his shoulders, how the ink under his cuffs seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat. He stepped forward, placing himself between them, not protective, not possessive, just instinctive. "Shall we?" His voice came out even, too even. Gwen tilted her head toward the dining room. "Dinner's ready. Oysters first. They're best cold." Naira's gaze flicked to him then, brief, assessing. Her foot brushed the side of his shoe as she passed, the barest contact through leather, gone before he could react. But it was enough. A reminder. A dare. The 3 of them moved into the candlelit dining room. The long ebony table waited, settings precise, crystal, silver, 3 places. No head of the table, no hierarchy visible, only the illusion of equality. Sebastian pulled out Naira's chair first, habit, reflex, then Gwen's. As he leaned over his wife to adjust her napkin, her hand found his under the tablecloth. Fingers cool, steady. She squeezed once. Not affection. Possession. He straightened, took his seat between them, and felt the room shrink to the width of the table. The first course arrived. The air thickened with salt, citrus, and the unspoken promise that nothing tonight would remain hidden. Not the marks on skin, not the nights stolen, not the woman who had watched it all and waited for the perfect moment to serve it back, cold, elegant, and final. The oysters arrived on a bed of crushed ice, glistening shells arranged in a perfect half-moon around a central silver bowl of mignonette. The waiter placed the platter in the center of the table with the reverence of a sacrament, then withdrew without a word. Candle flames reflected in the crystal flutes, throwing tiny shards of light across the ebony surface. Gwen lifted the first oyster with delicate fingers, tipped it to her lips, and swallowed without sound. She set the empty shell back on the ice, then dabbed the corner of her mouth with the linen napkin. Slow, deliberate, the motion drawing every eye. "These are from Miyagi," she said, voice soft as falling snow. "Briny, clean, almost sweet at the finish. Like certain secrets, I think. They taste better when they're fresh." Sebastian reached for his own, fork poised, but his hand stilled. He felt the shift before he could name it, the air in the room thickening, the temperature seeming to drop as though someone had opened a window to winter. Naira mirrored Gwen's motion, lifting an oyster, but her eyes flicked to Sebastian first, quick, questioning, before she tipped the shell. The faint slurp was the only sound for a moment. Gwen smiled, small and serene. "Naira, you grew up in Busan, didn't you? Before your family moved to Seoul when you were 12? Naira's fork paused halfway to her mouth. The oyster hovered, a pearl of seawater trembling at the edge. "Yes," she said evenly. "Busan. How did you—" "Your mother still lives there," Gwen continued, as if answering a different question. "In Haeundae now. Nice view of the beach. She runs a small gallery, contemporary ceramics mostly. You visit twice a year. Last time was Chuseok. You brought her that white porcelain vase from the Insadong market, the one with the crane motif. She posted a photo of it on her private Instagram. Beautiful piece." The room went colder. Sebastian could feel it in his fingertips, in the sudden tightness at the base of his skull. Naira set the oyster down, untouched. Her smile, the one that had always been half amusement, half armor, faltered for the first time he could remember. Not gone, just cracked, a hairline fracture. "I don't recall mentioning my mother to you," Naira said. Her voice stayed level, but the cadence had changed, slower, more careful. "You didn't have to." Gwen selected another oyster, examined it in the candlelight as though appraising a diamond. "She tags you in stories sometimes. Subtle. A shoulder in the frame, your silhouette against the sea. Nothing overt, but enough. I've always admired how you protect your privacy. It's disciplined." Sebastian's pulse thudded against his collar. He knew Naira's mother existed, knew she called on Sundays, knew the woman preferred green tea to coffee. But the details had never mattered. They were background noise, irrelevant to the nights when Naira's nails scored his back and her breath came hot against his throat. Now those fragments were being laid out like evidence. He cleared his throat. "Gwen?" She turned to him, eyes calm. "Yes, darling?" The endearment landed like a velvet glove over steel. He felt Naira's gaze shift to him, sharp, searching. He met it for half a second, then looked away. Gwen continued, unruffled. "Naira studied art history at Hongik University. Dropped out in her 3rd year, not because of grades, yours were excellent, but because you started modeling for a small agency. High fashion, editorial. You hated the runway, but loved the still shoots, the control, the way the camera couldn't ask questions. Naira's fingers tightened around the stem of her wine glass. The crystal sang faintly under the pressure. "You've done your homework." "I prefer to think of it as courtesy," Gwen replied. "When you invite someone into your home, you should know who they are, not just the version they show in dim lighting and expensive sheets." The words sliced clean. Sebastian felt the heat rise in his face, not embarrassment exactly, but something closer to exposure. The tattoos under his cuffs burned. He remembered Naira's mouth on them last week, teeth grazing ink, her laugh low when he hissed. Now that memory sat naked on the table between them. Naira exhaled once, short and controlled. "And what about you, Gwen? What secrets should I know before the main course?" Gwen's smile returned, softer now, almost kind. "Oh, I have none worth hiding. My life is very transparent. Ask my husband. He has always known exactly who I am." Sebastian's hand moved under the table, instinct, to find Gwen's knee. She caught his fingers before they reached fabric, interlaced them with hers, and squeezed. Not gently. A warning. A claim. Naira watched the exchange. Her smile was gone entirely now. In its place, something colder, more alert. A predator reassessing the terrain. The waiter returned with a second platter. Seared wagyu, rare, blood pooling beneath. No one touched it. The candles burned lower. The room stayed cold. And the first course, barely begun, already tasted like ash. The main course arrived without fanfare, thin slices of wagyu arranged in overlapping petals on black porcelain, a single line of reduced balsamic tracing the edge like spilled ink. The waiter set the plates down in perfect unison, then vanished. No one moved to pick up a fork. Gwen regarded her plate for a long moment, as though the meat itself were part of the conversation. Then she reached beneath the table, slow, unhurried, and produced a slim black leather folder. It was the kind used for contracts and boardrooms, unmarked except for a single embossed initial, G. She placed it in the center of the table, equidistant from all three settings. The candlelight caught the leather surface and made it gleam like wet obsidian. Naira's eyes flicked to the folder, then back to Gwen. Her posture remained straight, but her fingers had gone still around the stem of her wine glass. The earlier fracture in her smile had widened. Now it was a deliberate mask, held in place by will alone. Sebastian stared at the folder as though it might detonate if he blinked. Gwen's voice, when she spoke, was the same soft timbre she used to order coffee or discuss the weather. No tremor, no triumph, just fact. "These are copies," she said. "The originals are secure. I thought it only fair you both see them at the same time." She opened the folder with 2 fingers, revealing the first page. A photograph, time-stamped, grainy but unmistakable. Sebastian and Naira in the back seat of his black Maybach, parked in the underground garage of her building. Her head thrown back against the leather, his mouth on the curve of her throat, one hand disappearing beneath the hem of her dress. The date in the corner, 6 weeks ago. Naira inhaled sharply, barely audible, but enough to make the candle flames quiver. Gwen turned the page without pause. Text messages, screenshots arranged in chronological order. Naira's number, her real one, highlighted in red. Exchanges that were never vulgar, never careless, but intimate in their brevity. Tonight, doors open. Miss the way you taste. Another page, bank transfers, small amounts disguised as consulting fees to a shell company Naira used for freelance work. The trail was clean to anyone who didn't know where to look. Gwen had looked. She closed the folder gently, rested her palms flat on its surface. The silence stretched, thick, absolute. Sebastian could hear his own pulse in his ears, steady, then erratic, then steady again, like a man trying to remember how to breathe. Gwen turned to him. Her eyes were calm, dark pools reflecting nothing but the candlelight. "Would you like to explain?" she asked. "Or shall I?" The question landed without weight, without venom. It was polite, courteous, the way one might ask a guest if they preferred red or white. Sebastian opened his mouth, closed it. The words he had rehearsed, deflections, half-truths, threats wrapped in charm, dissolved on his tongue. His flawless mask, the one he had worn since he was 22 and first learned that control was currency, cracked. Not with a shatter, with a hairline fracture that spiderwebbed outward in perfect silence, the loudest silence he had ever heard. It roared in the space between his ribs, in the sudden heat behind his eyes, in the way his hands that had signed death warrants, moved money across borders, held women like weapons, now trembled faintly against the tablecloth. He pressed them flat to stop it. The ink at his cuffs felt like it was bleeding through the fabric. Naira watched him. No accusation in her gaze, just assessment. She had always been good at reading rooms. Now, she was reading the end of one. Gwen waited, patient, unmoved. Finally, Sebastian spoke. His voice came out rough, stripped of its usual velvet. "How long?" Gwen tilted her head. "Long enough to be certain. Longer than you think." Naira exhaled, a short, controlled breath. "You've known since before the invitation?" "Before the first one," Gwen corrected gently. "I waited for the right moment. Patience is a luxury I can afford." She reached for her knife, cut into the wagyu with surgical precision. A thin line of red welled up on the plate. She lifted the bite to her lips, chewed slowly, swallowed. "The meat is excellent," she said. "Rare, but not cold. I find that balance matters." Sebastian stared at his untouched plate. The blood had pooled beneath the slices, darkening the porcelain. He felt it in his own veins, slow, thick, inevitable. Naira set her fork down. The clink was deafening. "So this is the end?" she asked. Not to Sebastian, to Gwen. Gwen smiled, small, almost kind. "No, darling. This is the beginning of clarity, of new terms, of dinner without lies." She glanced at Sebastian again. The folder still sat between them, open now, the photographs and messages exposed under the candlelight like wounds that had finally been cleaned. He met her gaze. For the first time in years, perhaps ever, he had nothing left to hide behind. And the silence that followed was louder than any confession he could have made. The crème brûlée arrived on 3 small white porcelain dishes, each crowned with a thin golden crust of caramelized sugar. The waiter torched them tableside with quiet efficiency, the blue flame licking the surface until it hardened into a glassy shield. He withdrew without a glance at the folder still open between them, the photographs and messages now lit like exhibits under the soft glow of the candles. No one had touched the main course beyond a single bite from Gwen. The wagyu had cooled, the blood congealing into dark pools. The air in the dining room felt thinner now, as though the room itself had exhaled and refused to inhale again. Sebastian stared at the dessert. The torch had left a faint scent of burnt sugar that mingled with jasmine, smoke, and the metallic tang of his own rising panic. He picked up the small silver spoon, tapped the crust once. It cracked with a sound like thin ice giving way. Gwen lifted her spoon in perfect synchronicity, broke her own surface, and took the first bite. The cream yielded beneath the caramel. She closed her eyes for half a second, savoring. When she opened them again, they were fixed on Sebastian. Naira had not moved. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers laced so tightly the knuckles showed white. The quiet confidence that had always defined her, the same indifference that had first drawn him in, was still there, but it had sharpened into something brittle. She watched Gwen the way one watches a blade being drawn from its sheath, not in fear, but in recognition of skill. The power balance had shifted forever. It had not happened with a shout or a slap. It had happened in the slow, deliberate turning of pages, in the calm recitation of facts, in the way Gwen had never once raised her voice. Sebastian felt it in his bones. The illusion of control he had worn like a second skin was gone, stripped, burned away over 5 courses and 1 folder. He set the spoon down, untouched. "I could leave," he said. The words came out low, rough, not a threat, a statement, testing the air. Gwen tilted her head. "You could." Naira's gaze flicked to him then, brief, unreadable. She said nothing. He continued. "I could walk out that door, take what's mine, the accounts, the networks, the leverage, start again somewhere else." "You could try," Gwen agreed softly. "But the accounts are already frozen. The networks have been quietly informed that certain arrangements have changed. And the leverage?" She gestured lightly toward the folder. "That's no longer yours alone." Sebastian felt the chair beneath him suddenly feel like a trap door. He had built an empire on secrets, on being the one who knew more, saw more, moved first. Now, every move he had ever made had been catalogued, time-stamped, weaponized. Naira spoke for the first time since the folder opened. Her voice was steady, but quieter than before. "And me?" Gwen turned to her. The smile was small, almost gentle. "You're free to go whenever you like. The door isn't locked. But if you stay, if you choose to remain in this city, in these circles, you'll do so under new terms. No more shadows, no more borrowed nights. Everything in the open. Or nothing at all." Naira's eyes narrowed. "You're offering me a seat at the table." "I'm offering clarity," Gwen corrected. "You've already been eating from it. Now you decide whether to swallow or spit." Sebastian looked between them. 2 women who had never met until tonight, yet who now held the threads of his life between them like silk. One had worn his ring for years. The other had worn his marks for months. Neither looked at him with pity, only expectation. He exhaled once, long and slow. The tattoos under his cuffs felt like scars now, reminders of choices that had led him here. "I stay," he said. The words tasted like surrender. Not defeat, not yet, but the first step across a line he had never imagined crossing. Gwen nodded once. "Then we begin again. No more secrets. No more separate beds. No more games played in the dark. We share everything. The empire, the nights, the decisions." Naira studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she picked up her spoon, tapped the crust. It cracked cleanly. She took a bite. Swallowed. "I'll think about it." Gwen's smile deepened, just a fraction. "Take your time. Dessert is meant to be savored." She set her own spoon down, leaned back in her chair, and regarded them both with the calm certainty of someone who had already won. The candles had burned low. Wax pooled on the silver holders like tears no one had shed. Sebastian felt the weight of the new rules settle over him. Not chains, but a different kind of restraint. One he would have to learn. Gwen's voice came again, soft and decisive, the final note of the evening. "Welcome to dinner, darling. We're just getting started." The Korean Mafia boss thought his affairs were hidden. He was wrong. His wife had been hiding something far more dangerous: patience.